Hey, you ignored a call from Mom the other day, didn't you? What? No, I didn't ignore her. Don't lie, she complained to me that you didn't answer the phone. I thought, here we go again. My husband, John, said this, but I hadn't received a call from my mother-in-law since we got married. I never really liked her. She always doted on John, and I felt left out. Shall I show you the proof? I asked. Just apologize to her directly next time, John replied. But your parents' house is quite far, isn't it? Don't worry about that, John said with a grin. The thing is, Mom is coming here tomorrow. We'll be together all the time from now on. I was so shocked that I accidentally dropped and broke a glass I was washing. It made a loud crash and shattered into pieces. It was one of my favorite glasses. You can't just spring this on me. We don't even have a spare room. Well, what about your study? You barely use it anyway. Why does it have to be my room? Just make sure everything's tidy before Mom arrives. You can even throw stuff out if you want. His words confused me. Why is she coming? Is there a reason? No reason, John said. I just want to be with Mom. I was so stunned I couldn't say anything. John has always been a bit of a mama's boy, but after his father passed away, it's gotten worse. His father used to be a buffer between us, but now it's all about Mom. As his wife, I feel like I'm just not a priority. I felt like I didn't even exist anymore. Shouldn't you at least discuss this with me? Why should I discuss anything with you? This is our house, and I inherited it. Just do as I say. Realizing it was pointless to argue with John, his mind was only on his mom, I decided to take action. Fine, if that's what you want, I'll do it. It's okay to empty it out, right? That's what I've been saying. Don't make me repeat myself. Do you understand? 7 seconds later, I called the demolition company. What? You're not going to pick up your mother? I asked John. She's arriving tomorrow. Why don't you come back with her? I'm sure she'll be delighted. Sometimes John does say the right things, but I couldn't stay there any longer. I had to get him out of the house. Everything was set. I was going to demolish the house and give John and his mother a big surprise. I'm Emily, a 34-year-old full-time homemaker. This year, I'm home. What's for dinner? I asked. It's almost ready, John replied curtly. John and I have been married for 3 years. We met at a corporate party when I was working at an event planning company, and he was one of the attendees. Excuse me, I had said back then. Would you like to exchange contact information? That was our first conversation. I was surprised, but it didn't feel unpleasant. Sorry for being so sudden, John said. It's love at first sight for me. Love at first sight? This is my first time feeling this way, I replied. It's a first for me too, John admitted. We exchanged contact details, and I was excited all the way home that day. Later, John reached out, and we went out for a meal. At first, he seemed a bit unreliable, but he asked me out on a date, and we started seeing each other. John was 3 years older than me, but it didn't feel like a big difference. I felt comfortable around him, and we got married 6 months later. However, after we got married, John's attitude changed drastically. My mom says she wants to see you, he said. We're going to my parents' house tomorrow. Isn't that a bit sudden? I asked. We're off tomorrow, so it's a good time, John replied. To be honest, I've always found my mother-in-law difficult. It started with our pre-marriage meeting. You're finally back, she said when I arrived. And who is this? This is my girlfriend, Emily, John introduced me. She looked me up and down. Come in for now, she said. I felt like she was glittering at me. During the marriage introduction, John became even quieter. His father's presence was quite significant. Now you finally get away from your mother, John's father said. Really? I asked. Emily didn't know, John said. He's always been a mama's boy since he was little. Is that so? I glanced at John, who seemed intimidated by his father. John used to hide behind his mother whenever he was scared. I was curious about his past, so I ended up chatting and laughing with my father-in-law. At one point, my mother-in-law interrupted. Hey, Dad, that's enough. We were just getting to a good part, so I nodded in agreement. My mother-in-law's gaze turned sharp, and I realized I might have overstepped. We can talk about this some other time, she said. Okay, I agreed. Eventually, our marriage was approved, and thanks to my father-in-law's kindness, we stayed the night at their house. Emily, do you drink? My father-in-law asked. Yes, I do, I replied. Why don't we have some together? He suggested. Sure, I said. My father-in-law loved his liquor, and while drinking with him, I'd learned more about John's past that I hadn't heard before. His father had always been strict with him to build his confidence, and it was tough, but he said, I'm counting on you, bowing his head to me. That's when our relationship started to improve. After drinking for a couple of hours, I realized John had disappeared. Where's John? I asked. I haven't seen Mom either. Where could they have gone? They'll probably be back soon, my father-in-law said. At that time, I still didn't know John's true nature. My father-in-law and I ended up drinking until almost the next day. He fell asleep, probably tired from drinking. As I was about to clean up, someone scolded me. How dare you drink so much as a woman? I was startled by my mother-in-law's voice from behind me. You understand that you'll have to follow my instructions from now on, right? She said. Yes, I understand. And be careful with John. He's sensitive, she added. Understood. But where is John? I asked. I've put him to bed, she replied. I was shocked. It seemed impossible that a grown man over 30 would need his mother to put him to bed. Just don't get in the way of me and John, she warned. Was this what my father-in-law had been hinting at? Could John really be such a mama's boy? After the stern warning from my mother-in-law, I went to bed. The next morning, she told me, from now on, with Mom not around, you need to pull your weight. I know. We're counting on you, Emily, she said. There were no further words from my mother-in-law. After we became a couple, I confronted John with a question that had been bothering me. John, are you a mama's boy? What? No way. Did you take what Dad said seriously? John replied. There are other things that concern me too, I said. Just drop it, okay? John said. Despite his words, I wondered if he was actually afraid of his father. Then something happened that seemed to unravel everything. We were heading to John's parents' house as his mother had asked us to come. I wondered why, since we had never been summoned like this after getting married. I sensed something was off as we arrived home. Mom, I've missed you, John said as his mother greeted him. She completely ignored me. Inside, they were having a great time, and I wondered why I was even there. Then I noticed something. My father-in-law wasn't there. Where's father-in-law? I asked. He must be at the hospital, John's mother said casually. Is something wrong? I asked. I don't know. He's been feeling unwell lately, she replied, sounding indifferent. Isn't that concerning? What do you mean? She asked, sighing. Why don't you go check on him? He seems to like you. That's not the point, I said. I looked to John for support, but he was completely absorbed in the cake his mother had baked, not even glancing at me. Then they did something unbelievable. We have plans to go out, John said. Can you stay home and watch the house? Stay home? I was surprised. Yes, it's for Dad, John said. He'd be troubled if no one's home, but you can do whatever you want while we're gone. It's not a bad deal, right? Wait, we need to go take care of things here, John's mother said. With that, they left. They said I could do as I pleased, but I had no interest in doing anything. I was left alone in their house, just waiting. Hours later, I heard the door open and hurried to the entrance. Father-in-law, what's going on? Where are they? They went out, he asked, confused. Let's talk in the living room. I moved to the living room and explained what had happened. I see, he said. I wasn't even informed they were coming today. Plus, I had a hospital visit planned for today. Mother-in-law must have known about it and might have planned this while I was away. But why would she do that? My father-in-law seemed deep in thought, crossing his arms. He looked like he was concerned about me being in the way. But it's so obvious, won't it eventually come out? He wondered aloud. He must have thought it was worth the risk. What he told me was shocking. If his suspicions were true, it would be a disaster. He made a suggestion. How about we exchange contact information? It might come in handy if something happens. I would appreciate that, I said. We need to be careful around those two. I don't mind, but I don't want you to suffer, he added. That's kind of you, father-in-law. Please take care of yourself, I said. You're the only one who says that to me, he replied with a sad smile. Seeing him like that made me feel lonely too. We waited for John and his mother to return, but they didn't come back. Emily, isn't your phone ringing? My father-in-law asked. I checked my phone and saw a missed call from my husband. Where are you? John texted. Sorry for the late reply. I'm at home. And mother-in-law? He asked. She's here with me. We're staying overnight, I replied. John's response was baffling. What's that supposed to mean? So don't bother coming back. Don't joke about this. See you. He hung up, leaving me stunned. Is something wrong? I asked. It seems they're at the other house and mother-in-law is staying the night. They must hate me that much, I said, feeling ridiculous. I need to think about this, I said, looking at my father-in-law's serious expression. What will you do, Emily? He asked. I'll leave now. I can still make it home. I won't let them do whatever they want, I replied. John is lucky to have a wife like you, he said. I said goodbye and left. I had to speak my mind to my husband and mother-in-law. Exhausted from changing trains and riding the bullet train, I finally arrived home past 11 p.m. Breathing heavily, I opened the front door and heard their laughter. Irritated, I went straight to confront them. "Oh, you're back. You're late. What were you doing?" John said. Unable to hold back, I confronted them both. "What are you doing here?" "We're just visiting," John's mother said. "Visiting and leaving father-in-law like that? There's no need to get so angry," John said. "Yeah, that's no way to talk," his mother added. "You decided this without any communication," I said. "That's enough. Mother-in-law is here after all. If you don't like it, you can leave," John said. "This is my house, isn't it?" I responded. "It's just a house your parents gave you," John said. Indeed, the house I lived in was given to me by my parents. My father had built it with the little money he had left after my mother died when I was young. He was my last remaining parent, and that's why I couldn't forgive their attitude. My father-in-law said, "Anyway, you should leave tomorrow." "Fine," I replied. I went to the room I use as a study whenever something unpleasant happens. My hobby is making jewelry, so I spent the time absorbed in crafting. Before I knew it, the morning sun had risen. I went to the living room where my mother-in-law was already awake. "You look terrible," she said. "Thanks to you," I replied. "So you'll be leaving today?" she asked. "Yes, I know," I said. The mood was gloomy that morning. My mother-in-law left for her house around noon. Watching my husband send her off with a sad look was unbearable. Afterward, John and his mother were quiet. It was peaceful without her. I wished it could always be like this, but it wasn't meant to be. "We need to talk. Have a seat," John said when I returned from work. I noticed he was acting unusually. "What's this talk about?" I asked. "Actually, father-in-law has collapsed," John said. "Collapsed? Why?" I asked. "You heard about it from him, didn't you?" "I heard something before, but it seems pretty serious," John said. "That's because you two neglected him. Can you take care of father-in-law?" John asked. "Take care of him? Why me?" "What about your mom?" I asked. "It's father-in-law's request," John said. I was full of doubts. I was worried about father-in-law's collapse, but why me? I immediately contacted him. "I heard from John, but yes, it must have been sudden for you," father-in-law said. "It was. I don't think I have much time left." "I know my body well," he said. "Don't talk like that, please," I said. "There's something I need to ask of you. This is something I can only entrust to you, Emily," father-in-law said. He explained his one wish, revenge on John and mother-in-law. He was fed up with their indifference, even as he fell ill. I decided to fulfill father-in-law's earnest wish and help him in any way I could. "Thank you," he said. I conveyed this decision immediately. "Great. What about your job?" he asked. "I'll quit, of course. I can't work and take care of father-in-law at the same time," I said. The next day, I submitted my resignation and went to my in-laws' house. When I arrived, father-in-law, now frail, thanked me. "Thank you for coming so soon." "It's okay. I've made my decision," I said. "Good. Isn't mother-in-law here?" he asked. "She went to a friend's place today," I replied. "I see, but this might be an opportunity," father-in-law said. We needed to plan our next steps. "Let's discuss our strategy," I said. "I have an idea. Can I tell you?" father-in-law asked. "Of course," I replied. "It's about what happens after I die," he said. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Honestly, I don't want to leave anything to those two," he explained. "You mean the inheritance?" I asked. "Yes, they don't know, but they'll regret it after I'm gone." "Are you sure?" I asked. "I've thought about it a lot since I got sick," he said. "Understood," I said. We discussed various things, then mother-in-law returned as if nothing had happened. "What, you're already here?" she said. She wasn't reliable, so I knew I had to handle things. "I know what to do," I said. I couldn't leave father-in-law's care to mother-in-law. I spent about half the week at their house, but father-in-law's condition worsened. "Father-in-law, are you okay?" I asked. "Sorry for the trouble. This is my job now. Don't worry, Emily. I'm counting on you for what comes next," he said. Since I started taking care of father-in-law, mother-in-law never showed any concern or said anything caring. At least she could say something to him. "It's fine, they'll regret it eventually," I said. "Maybe, but still, how's John behaving?" I asked. "Nothing unusual. He might be quiet now, but stay alert," father-in-law warned. When I went back to get some change of clothes, John had been waiting for me. "How's Dad?" he asked. "He was okay today, but his condition is not great," I replied. "I see. Why don't you visit him now?" John suggested. He just complained, I said. Since I started caring for father-in-law, John often asked about his condition. Maybe he was feeling some regret. I hoped things might change for the better. I just wanted John to become more responsible. Then mother-in-law arrived. Mom, did you say you were coming today? I asked. I was nearby, she said. The troublesome person had arrived. Make yourself comfortable. We were about to start cooking, she said. Will Emily cook? She asked. Yes, she will, I replied. Then I'm looking forward to it, mother-in-law said. I began preparing the meal, thinking that one extra person wouldn't make much difference. Here you go, I said, serving the food. It doesn't look bad, but how's the taste? Mother-in-law asked, taking a bite. I was astonished. She spat it out immediately. What are you doing? How dare you serve something so terrible? She exclaimed. It tastes the same as always to me, I said. Mother-in-law glittered at John, and he quickly changed his opinion, belittling me just like she did. This tastes like garbage. Maybe you're too focused on Dad's care to cook properly, he said. It was rude to spit it out like that. Enough. Let's go eat out, John said. The two of them stood up and left the house. I felt foolish for hoping John would change. No time for hesitation now. John returned alone after 2 hours. Where's mother-in-law? I asked. She's gone home, John replied. I see. What was that earlier about changing your opinion based on mother-in-law's mood? I asked. I always thought that way, John said. I realized it's time to set things straight. Prepare your own meals from now on, especially if it's that bad, I said. Seriously, John asked. Of course, I replied. I went back to caring for father-in-law. After about 3 months, his condition suddenly worsened, and we rushed him to the hospital. Hang in there, father-in-law, I urged. I might not last much longer, he said. Don't say that. There's something I need to tell you. Remember the inheritance talk? I've written a will. A lawyer will contact you after I pass, he said. Please don't talk anymore, I said. His pulse weakened on the way to the hospital. By the time we arrived, he had stopped breathing. I was in shock, my hands trembling as I made phone calls. I tried reaching mother-in-law, but she didn't answer. John finally picked up after several attempts. What's wrong? He asked. Father-in-law has passed away, I said. What? He said. John replied. Mother-in-law is there with you, right? Yeah, let me talk to her, John said. Mother-in-law took the phone. Father-in-law just passed away, I said. Oh, is that so? She replied coldly. That's all you have to say? What else? We're free from him now, she said. I had never felt such anger before. You'll regret it, I said. Neither John nor mother-in-law came to the hospital that day. I spent the night at my in-laws' house. The next day, they were already at the hospital. Mom, I'm tired, I said. Yes, let's go home, she replied. I couldn't help but wonder why I was being made to witness this. Father-in-law's death seemed to trigger the release of emotions John had been hiding. You just got here. I'm here. No complaints, John said. What's with John? I wondered. It's just the usual. I definitely prefer it this way. You got nothing to fear now. Don't defy me, John said. This was the moment I began to consider divorce. Mother-in-law led a simple, cost-cutting family funeral for father-in-law. Even in death, father-in-law was disregarded, which pained me deeply. I returned home, feeling the weight of the most unpleasant funeral I had ever experienced. From then on, I lived with a heavy heart. A lawyer contacted me, and I remembered father-in-law's words from the ambulance. I understand. I'll be there shortly, I told the lawyer. At his office, I learned about father-in-law's will, which contained shocking details. I realized I could use this information for revenge against my husband and mother-in-law. When I got home, my husband confronted me aggressively. Hey, you ignored a call from Mom, didn't you? He said. I didn't ignore any call, I replied. Don't lie. She complained that you didn't answer. I was frustrated. My husband often doted on his mother, making me feel excluded. Should I show you the proof? I asked. Just apologize to her directly next time, he said. Your parents' house is quite far, isn't it? I asked. Don't worry about that. Mom is coming here tomorrow. We'll be together all the time from now on, he said with a chuckle. Hearing this, I accidentally dropped and shattered a glass I was washing. The loud crash echoed, and I realized it was one of my favorites. The room isn't even ready, I protested. What about your room? The study that you barely use? He replied. Why does it have to be my room? I asked. Clean up before Mom arrives. You can even throw stuff out if you want, he said. I was confused. Having just read father-in-law's will, my mind wasn't working properly. What's the reason for this? I asked. There's no reason. I just want to be with Mom, he said. I was speechless. I realized how much father-in-law had been a buffer between us. I never imagined they would act so quickly. Shouldn't we discuss this first? I asked. Why do I need to consult you? This is our house. This house was inherited by me. Stop nagging and just do as I say, he replied. I realized talking to my husband was pointless. His mind was completely occupied by his mother. If that's the case, I had my own plans. If that's what you want, I'll do it. Is it okay to empty it out? I asked. Yes, just confirm it, he replied. A few seconds later, I made a call to a demolition company. Yes, that's right. As soon as possible, please. Tomorrow is fine. Thank you, I said. What are you talking about? My husband asked. I'm thinking of selling some unwanted stuff. That call sounded like a good idea, I replied. His foolishness was astounding. I suggested to him, I'll be cleaning up. Why don't you go pick up your mother? She's coming tomorrow, right? Yes, come back with her and she'll be happy, I said. Sometimes you do say the right things, he replied. I left with my husband while everything was set in motion. I packed my belongings and had John's sellable items taken away by a recycling company. After tidying up the room, I visited a real estate agent. Since the inheritance procedures would take some time, I decided to rent another house temporarily. How about this place? If you sign the contract today, you can move in tomorrow, the agent said. I signed the contract and moved into my new home the next day. It was my last day in the old house, which had been left to me by my father. I needed to show John and his mother the consequences of their actions. I planned to build another house on that property someday. I spent my last night in the old house and moved all my belongings to the new place by morning. The demolition of the old house began shortly after. About 2 hours later, I received a call. Hello. Hey, what's happening? The house is being demolished. Mom's stuff is about to arrive. Is that so? Explain yourself. All right, I'll come over, I said. When I arrived, my husband rushed over to me. Why is the house being demolished? He asked. It's revenge, John. It was also father-in-law's wish, I said. Don't talk nonsense, he shouted. This house is mine. I can do whatever I want with it, I said defiantly. My mother-in-law attempted to attack me in response. Please stop. How dare you? Now we have nowhere to live. That's for you to figure out, Mom. We might have to go back to our family home, John said reluctantly. I decided to play my final card. I think you should reconsider that. What are you talking about? Just look at this. I showed them father-in-law's will. What is this? It can't be true, John said, shocked. It's not a lie. This is the will. It specifies the transfer of rights to the family house to me and includes any remaining savings my father-in-law had left behind. Hold on, there's a reserved portion of the inheritance, right? We're still entitled to some money, my mother-in-law said. How unfortunate for you. The remaining inheritance is only $20,000, I said, which means $5,000 each for you. What? That can't be. There should be more. Please accept it. It's the truth. Father-in-law anticipated this. In addition to the will, there was a letter to me. He left a minimal amount of money and donated the rest to charitable organizations. What will you do? They asked, silent. You should think about not returning to the family home for now. Maybe start looking for a new place soon, I advised. My mother-in-law tried to grab me again, but dramatically fell over. It's really unfortunate it had to come to this, but it can't be helped. If only you had thought more about your son, none of this would have happened, I said. I walked away, suppressing a smile at their future predicament. Back in my new home, I prepared the divorce papers. Please take care of it for me. Thank you. I believe the inheritance procedures will be completed by next week. Okay, please keep handling it. A week later, the divorce was finalized. My ex and mother-in-law were making a fuss about the inheritance, but it was too late. I knew the reserved share was a small amount and that my ex and mother-in-law would probably spend it quickly. After finalizing the inheritance process, I went to the family house to clear out my mother-in-law's belongings. There, I found my ex-husband and mother-in-law. What are you doing here? I asked. They turned to look at me. I'm clearing out someone's stuff. You can't do that. But this house is officially mine now. Please leave quickly. Wait, can't you reconsider? There's no way I can do that now. If you don't leave, I'll call the police. We're strangers now. Mom, let's just go. This is my house, I said firmly. Reluctantly, they left. I finished cleaning out the house, keeping only my late father-in-law's belongings. I hoped this would bring him peace. Indeed, it seemed so. The neighborhood now knows my ex and mother-in-law as the troublesome duo, living modestly in a small apartment and frequently fighting loudly. I never want to deal with such a mama's boy again. As for me, I continue to live in my new rented room. I couldn't bear to stay in the house with such unpleasant memories, so I decided to keep it under father-in-law's watch for now. It's time for me to move forward for myself.